We start with future Anakin Skywalker, he's starring as 7-year-old Jamie, watching some sort of Power Rangers inspired TV show about a superpowered bloke in a red suit with terrible acting. And no, not Ezra Miller's recent Flash movie. As his workaholic dad Howard Langston misses his own office's Christmas party to flat out lie to all his clients about how they're all his number one customer. And both his wife Liz and his own PA soon warn him about how he's going to miss his kid's karate class if he don't stop being a compulsive liar and get his skates on already. But after finally heading out, he gets caught in traffic and then busted by the cops after trying to be smart and use a hard shoulder to cut in line. And the hilariously sarcastic officer promptly makes him do silly walks and recite the alphabet forwards and backwards for shits and giggles. And before he can say A, B, C, D, L, M, N, O, fuck you and all your hoes, little Jamie gets his purple belt as his dad arrives way too late to see it. So naturally, just your average everyday hard-working 250-pound of pure muscle machine and all-American dad Howard Langston eventually arrives home fully prepared for a bollocking, but first gets emasculated by his overly nice yet passive-aggressive creepo neighbour Ted, who's put up the Christmas lights on his own dang house. Liberties! And after traipsing inside and indeed getting a bollocking from a fed-up Liz and a dutty-eyed stare from a future kiddie-killing Sith Lord, he tries to make it up to his son, mainly by making yet another promise he'll inevitably end up breaking, and saying he'll totally defo get him the hot new turboman figurine what everyone desperately wants for Crimbo. And after doing some more lying to his wife about how he already totally got said doll when Liz asked him to do so 2 weeks ago, he gets up early the next morning to try and find one. But first promises Jamie that he'll defo totally be back in time for the Christmas parade this year, lol, trust me bro. Before getting a swift dose of karma by almost getting mauled and his hand chomped off by Ted's brand new jingle horse. Or reindeer I guess as they call them in the States. Who's a surprise Christmas gift for his perfect son Billy. And casually just mentions how he also got his kid one of them turbo bloke things and stuck it nice and neat under their tree at home.
Oh, good for you!
Anyway, a little later over at the local store, he meets an equally desperate mailman dad called Myron, who's also so desperate to get his sprog that turbo dude that he proceeds to launch into a full-on hysterical rant about capitalism, and also getting himself so worked up about his wife cheating on him with everyone in the post room that he ends up strangling a random bystander in the street and in broad daylight without consequence. And before you can say, well, I guess nothing ever changes, they burst into the shop looking for the all-coveted turbo toy, and just can't believe they're all sold out given it's Christmas Eve and they've had weeks to sort their shit out. And it's now so bad that everyone just laughs in their face for being such boneheaded typical blokes. Until the ex-barbarian and bona fide Terminator fella grabs them by the neck and demands to know where to find the last doll already. And after they say some lady in a fur coat just bought up the last in stock, he goes to run off after her. But the naughty mailman bloke does some more physical assaulting and smacks him across the room to get to her first and shit. So naturally, Howie declares total war and chooses a small remote control car to send his new frenemy arse over tit, but alas arrives too late to catch the woman and just ends up running down the street like a fucking madman. Meanwhile, creepy Ted tells an exhausted Lisa to take a break from all the baking and also cops a feel while he's at it, whilst after running all around town trying to find a toy and also getting beaten up by a cardboard cutout for some reason, Howard finally loses it when he phones home to check in and has to tell his own insufferable neighbour to
put that cookie down! Now!
And essentially stop trying to take over his life just because his own wife left him and shit. That crazy mailman from earlier then reappears and proposes a trucy team-up with his new arch-nemesis. And just as he's about to genuinely play the race card when Howard says thanks but no thanks to the needlessly hostile yet worryingly casual lady strangler, they overhear a guy yelling about where to find another turbo doll. So they jump into their motors to go get it. But dopey Howie just backs up into the motorbike of that sarcastic copper again, and just can't believe how badly his day's going, given he's been assaulted by a mailman, caused criminal damage to a police vehicle, and even almost got eaten by a bloody reindeer. And it ain't even friggin' lunchtime yet. But anyway, he heads over to the Mall of America and tries to enter the lottery to win a limited edition of the doll. But first he has to get his hands on one of the coloured balls to even be in with a chance. So naturally, he crawls over members of the public to try and grab one, but hilariously just gets pepper sprayed by that sadistic mailman who keeps appearing out of nowhere to make his life utterly hell, and then spends the next 20 minutes trying to chase down another one, which promptly ends up slap bang in the lap of some mop-head kid. But turns out she too is so sadistic that she ends up swallowing it just to spite him. And so he promptly just ends up getting beaten to a pulp in a small play pit by a bunch of mums who thinks he's some sort of pedo nonce carrying around here trying to fondle the kiddies' balls. But before he can say,
I'll be back,
he soon gets propositioned by a sleazy mall Santa, but not in the fun way, as he offers to sell him a doll straight from their toy factory. And once there, he just can't believe a dodgy mall Santa holed up at a dodgy warehouse full of an army of dodgy mall Santas would try and con him by charging 300 dineros for a cheap Chinese knockoff what ain't even in one piece. So, after calling them phony fakey frauds engaging in dishonest business practices, they all gang up on his ass and threaten him with candy cane nunchucks.
Boy, that escalated quickly. I mean, that really got out of hand fast.
And after a giant Father Christmas accidentally smacks the shit out of a midget one, and which hilariously turns out to be Mini-Me himself in an early cameo role, the local filth turn up and totally bust them all. Luckily, Howard's used to flat out deceiving everyone around him, so he proceeds to just do some more of that lying thing and pretends he's an undercover detective who's worked years on this case of busting a bunch of sleazy mall Santas of all absurd shapes and sizes. Later, his car breaks down on the highway and so calls up his son to say he'll defo be at that parade thing what starts in a few hours, but first he needs to speak to his mummy. But the kid just keeps banging on about how Turboman never breaks his promises, and which naturally triggers the ever-loving shit out of the exhausted guy who's been beaten up all day and almost got arrested twice in the pursuit of that fucking toy, and he just ends up shouting at his son and making them both feel like proper shit.
Aww.
Now drowning in sorrows with that friggin' Myron bloke, what's again just popped up out of nowhere in a random roadside cafe, they do some bonding about what toys they liked as kids, before hearing on the radio all about a competition to win a turbo doll. So naturally, they go right back to their violent rivalry and race over to confirm the answer to the quiz in person. And just can't believe said radio host was just offering a voucher for a Turboman gift sometime in the future when they're back in stock, which also triggers a psychotic Myron Mailman to threaten them all with a giant bomb in his sack, which only proceeds to then trigger me with flashbacks, because the last time I had a bomb in me sack, I had to go through 15 rounds of grueling chemotherapy, son. Anyway, after calling his bluff and finding out he's a total liar as well as an Austrian-shoving female throat throttler, the cops arrive again and soon bust their asses also again, including that bloody sarcastic officer what keeps ruining his day every 5 minutes. And after reaching into his bag and again using the old phony fakey bomb routine to totally trick the dopey cops,
this is a homemade explosive device, and I'll blow it up. Know why? Because I work for the post office, so you know I'm not stable.
They get the heck out of Dodge, before said phony fakey bomb actually turns out to have been real all along and totally explodes, because super dark and jarring comedy in a cheap family film, bro. And worse, now that cop's gonna get done for a hate crime if he survives, given he's out here now doing blackface to boo.
LOL.
Anyway, once Howard finally goes home, he finds Teddy Boy again undermining his masculinity by putting the star on top of his own bloody Christmas tree. So he finally snaps and decides to break into his house and totally nick his Turboman prezi what he got for his son Billy and stuff. But quickly faces a swift dose of karma yet again after trying to sneak out the back door and just getting chased through the house by Ted's wild Jingle Hall's reindeer thing. And after trapping it inside the small living room, he realises that recent chaos has recently started a fire, which soon starts to spread all over the gaff. And before you can say, he gets caught by a flabbergasted Liz and promptly bollocked by his neighbour for breaking into his home, stealing Christmas gifts from a small child, and committing straight up arson after locking up a wild animal.
Hey, that's fucked up.
Naturally, Liz is super disappointed that she's indeed married to a compulsive liar, and he didn't in fact get the Turboman doll 2 weeks ago like he said, and instead just asked Ted to drive her and Jamie to the parade already. And after they storm out and Ted seizes yet another moment to have a dig at him, average 250 pound of pure muscle machine Howard Langston takes out his frustrations by landing a full-on uppercut on a frightened reindeer.
You're not that guy, pal. Trust me. You're not that guy.
After taking a moment to reflect on exactly what he's just done in the last few hours, and then making it up to his reindeer buddy by literally sharing a beer with him, he realises he has to start keeping his bloody promises already. Whilst over at the parade, Liz and Teddy allow the prepubescent 7-year-old kiddies to go hang out in the middle of the crowded city full of strangers, all on their lonesome. Girls, I guess you could still do that back in the 90s, when we had a high trust society and black chaps only strangled grown-ass adult white women in the street and shit. Anyway, Howard races over to the parade, whilst the super horny Teddy shoots his shot and tries to stick it onto that super hot milfy bird what lives next door to him, despite her being married to a 6-foot stupid ex-bodybuilding alpha dude what beats up reindeer and terrorises children for fun. But she luckily manages to fight him off with a full flask of eggnog to the noggin and promptly gets the heck out of Dodge. Whilst elsewhere, and after literally running into that sarcastic police officer again, Howard's chased into a random building and promptly accosted by a bunch of stressed out producers who thinks he's a new performer they've hired for the show. And the poor sod soon stuffed into some sort of super tight crimson gimp suit and sent up on stage for the parade. Turns out he's become the bona fide turboman fella, and now gets to pick a kid to come up with him to collect a free turboman doll that he's been trying to track down all day.
Finally!
Naturally, he picks that moody scrote of his with the terrible acting. And now having finally given him a turboman for Christmas and technically turned up on time to the parade, he's thus fulfilled 2 promises in 1.
Nice.
Anyway, a curious and slightly confused little Jamie asks how this turbo fella knows his name. And before you can say, because he's clearly your dad, and are you really saying you can't instantly recognise that super thick iconic Austrian accent for fuck's sake? Turboman's arch enemy, Dementor, appears on stage, but this time in the form of Howard's arch nemesis, Myron the mailman. And before he can say, "It's okay son, because this chap only strangles middle-aged white women in a busy crowd and blows up cops with small postal packages," said Myron fella grabs Jamie and the doll after Howard has a hilarious brass cheek to warn him that he's now maybe gone a bit too far. Because Myron wants that Turbo MacGuffin doll for his kid at all costs. So naturally, Howard man shouts no homo before proceeding to shoot his load in his face, and thereby totally saving the day. Until Dementor's naughty henchman arrived to re-fuck up his day again. So Jamie karate kicks Dementor Myron in the gingangoolies and clambers up to a nearby roof. Whilst Lisa just wonders why her council tax money is funding negligent stage actors to recklessly chase her child up to fucking roofs and shit. Meanwhile, a pissed off Howard then unleashes the power of turbo time, and uses his jetpack to kill a bit of screen time and push this film to at least the 18-minute mark, and also ruin a black family's Christmas dinner whilst he's at it.
Oh, that's cold.
And after crash landing and watching helplessly as his psycho arch-frenemy brazenly steals his son's beloved toy right off his back, he uses his turbo rang to send the naughty postie crashing down to his doom. Or a soft Christmas float, I guess. And the sarcastic cop finally does something useful and sticks a gat in his face, whilst he's busy celebrating getting his hands on a turbo doll at last. As the real kind of sort of turbo man soars off to catch his falling son and save the day for a second time in 10 minutes. Huzzah! As a rather relieved Jamie just says,
Thanks, Turbo Man. I knew you'd save me.
and before you can say, "We didn't sound so sure 5 seconds ago when you were falling to your death and screaming like an utter cuck," he lands back down in the crowd and reunites little Jim Jam with his super worried mummy. As the kid then regrets his argument with his father on the phone that one time, and just wishes his dad could have seen all this utterly mental shit, well if he weren't too busy being off breaking promises left, right and centre. So doing a Tony Stark but 12 years early, Howard promptly tears up the superhero rulebook and reveals his super secret identity live to the crowd. And his fam just can't believe they've seemingly been living with a superpowered hero fella what loves to get reindeer drunk in his spare time. And we end with Ted getting the heck out of Dodge after realising he technically just came onto an alien superhero's wife before somehow getting bukkakied by eggnog but not in the good way. As Jamie also learns how to be a total melt like his dad and gives his Turbo Man doll to that psycho mailman for his kid to enjoy on Christmas. And leaving poor Howard just wondering why he fucking bothered, to be fair. And that's it. That's the movie. Though my favourite part was realising that Myron's kid ain't ever going to get that toy when surely that nutter ain't ever getting out of prison. Well, after 2 counts of attempted murder of both a child and a police officer, terrorism with a homemade explosive device, multiple assaults, and fraudulent impersonation of a fictional character. And sadly, my least favourite part was finding out that the poor sod who played Ted in this flick, and who was a beloved comedy actor who voiced iconic roles like Troy McClure in The Simpsons back in the day, got straight up murdered 2 years later by his coked up wife.
Damn!
But anyway, That's the plot, and that's your lot. Considering that bell thing so you don't miss any future recaps. Tell me if you like this flick in the comments if you have time. And I'll commit horrendous crimes against animals, children, and moviegoers in the relentless materialistic pursuit of a pointless kiddie's Christmas toy with you in the next one.